Hello and good morning, my foxes. Strap yourselves in for another awesome LoreScape Season 2 video. Today we're going to talk about the Tomb of Amascut. This is the newest raid to be added to OSRS so far, released in August of 2022. It's found in the Caridian Desert with the Jaltevis Pyramid at the Necropolis. This ties in a bit with the Caridian Desert lore in Gods of Gielinor in Season 1, so check those out too. Remember, if you like me and my content, hit the like, sub, or leave a comment to help me grow. Thanks, guys. This raid is all about freeing the lesser gods of the Menethite pantheon to keep Amascut from obtaining godhood. The tomb is comprised of 4 paths themed after Tumikin's avatars. 6 bosses reside inside the tomb. Akka, Guardian of Het. He is a large human warrior that was once dedicated to the god Het. Over time, he believed that Het had abandoned him, leading to his joining of the Children of Rebirth, a cult dedicated to Amascut's original form known as the Goddess of Rebirth. This was prior to her corruption, where she became the Devourer. The cult believed that in order to be rebirthed in perfect form, they had to achieve a perfect death. To attain this, they performed a ritual and called upon Amascut, drinking a lethal poison and sacrificing themselves in her name. The rest of the cult perished except for Akka, who was on the verge of death when Amascut arrived, sealing him in a sarcophagus. Amascut then performed a ritual to lure Het to her. Het, knowing it was a trap, went anyway out of the sense of duty he had for the warrior who had dedicated his life to him. Upon arrival, it wasn't Amascut he faced, but a manifestation of a vengeful Akka, which distracted Het long enough to be imprisoned by Amascut. It wouldn't be until later when an adventurer would defeat Akka and free Het, leaving some unusual ashes behind. The High Priest of Sophonim would take the ashes from the adventurer and cremate them in order to give a proper send-off. Baba, Guardian of Amkin. Once the matriarch of a large baboon troop whose dominion spread across the Caridian Desert. Baba became more afraid as she got older of her impending demise, as she loved ruling as matriarch and she didn't see her lazy and arrogant daughter as worthy to take her place. Amascut got wind of Baba's fears and thusly struck a deal with her. Amascut would grant her immortality so she could forever rule over her troops if they promised servitude to Amascut. As soon as Baba agreed to these terms, Amascut killed all with one spell and promptly reanimated them as undead. Under the control of Amascut, the troop very easily overpowered their goddess Amkin and captured her. It was later when an adventurer would defeat Baba, forcing her to retreat and freeing Amkin. She would then leave a banana behind, which, when taken to King Awagwe with her story, makes the king promise that her memory would live on. Kefri, Guardian of Scarabus. The Dawn Scarab were an extremely long-lived and intelligent race, unfortunately wiped out during the Caridian-Zerosian War. Kefri is the last of her kind. Scarabus rescued her, so she dedicated her life to his teachings, living in isolation and watching the desert from afar. Though she was content at first, she gradually desired children to pass her knowledge on to, and just like Baba, Amascut caught wind of her desires. Kefri takes Amascut up on her deal, which involved Kefri's servitude in exchange for offspring, which would save her race from extinction and make them smarter than she was herself. True to her word, Amascut warps another race of scarabs, but they did not have the intelligence Amascut implied they would have. Instead, Amascut destroyed Kefri's mind, technically making good on her deal by making the offspring smarter than she was. Having realized how she had been tricked, Kefri called out to Scarabus with her last moments of consciousness, luring him to Amascut, which thusly resulted in his capture. Indeed, later an adventurer would slay Kefri in order to free Scarabus, where they would acquire some of her dung. Inside the dung was a Scarabus egg, which they would take to the High Priest of Scarabus, who would look after it. Zabak, Guardian of Krondus. Though Zabak was once a regular crocodile, he embodied Krondus' ideals. He was not the fastest or strongest of his kind, but would use his resourcefulness to lure others into traps to eat them. Over time, he did become the strongest crocodile, but because of his gluttony, he found his food supply dwindling. Just like Kefri, Amascut discovered Zabak's desire and promised him so much food he would never go hungry again if he would help her catch Krondus, to which, of course, he agreed. Amascut, as devious as ever, actually cursed Zabak so that he could never starve and made it so everything he tried to eat would crumble to dust, starting his unending torment. Later, an adventurer would come and slay Zabak and free Krondus. They would take a fang that broke off and bury it on the river Elid. Tumikin's Warden, Final Boss. This is the final boss found alongside Elidinus' Warden. Imbuing the Staff of Great Power with half of Tumikin's essence and half of his wife, Elidinus' essence, he created these ancient automatons. They were created to protect the Caridian Desert and were used extensively throughout the Caridian-Zerosian War in an effort to push back the Zerosian forces. When Tubicon fell during that war, Elidinus had tasked the pharaoh Osmutton to hide the weapons the gods had used in order to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. Tumikin's shadow, Elidinus' ward, and the wardens would be buried with the pharaoh later on in Jeltefus' pyramid. The tomb would be buried in the sands, and the wardens would become legends. With the wardens having the ability to drain and transfer energy between divine beings, Amascut the Devourer sought them for her ascension to godhood. She would spend centuries capturing the lesser deities and finally bringing them to the Jeltefus pyramid to enact her plans. The adventurer would come along after and thwart her plans, freeing the lesser deities, but not before Amascut had already gathered a considerable amount of power. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed learning about the newest raid. Tune in next week for more lore.